Kentucky basketball is in need of a bounce-back victory, and they're going on the road this Saturday to face off against one of the most interesting teams in the SEC.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be diving into Kentucky basketball's matchup against the Vanderbilt Commodores, one of the most interesting teams in the SEC. New coach, new roster, and they're playing pretty well right now. Also on today's episode, of course, we're going to address it. Caleb Wilson commits to North Carolina over Kentucky. Pretty interesting commitment just last night. Going to dive into my thoughts on Wilson going to UNC. What's Kentucky going to do out of this on the recruiting trail and the transfer portal? We've got a few names here for you to keep an eye on. Today's episode, of course, is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app. You can create an account. You can use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. Let's go ahead and get into it. Got some really fun notes here on the Vanderbilt Commodores. In case you don't know, Kentucky basketball going on the road this weekend to face off against the Doors at 1:30, I believe, Eastern, if I'm not mistaken. If not, let me check here real quick. No, it's 2:30 Eastern on ESPN. Doors are 15-4 on the season, and just a couple of games ago, they secured a quad one victory against the Tennessee Volunteers, a 76-75 dub in Nashville. This was a game that Tennessee came back in late, and the Doors almost sold it several times, and yet Tennessee could not cash in at the free throw line to take this thing to OT. Vanderbilt is a very interesting team, like I mentioned, led by first-year head coach Mark Byington. I believe that's how you say his last name. He is from James Madison. He was previously at Georgia Southern before his 4 years at JMU. And last year, I'm sure a lot of you got to see James Madison play pretty well because they were 32-4 in the Sun Belt, 15-3 in conference play. They made the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament as a 12 seed last year. And of course, he moved up to coach the Vanderbilt Commodores, did Byington. Very good head coach with a very good roster, and it's kind of a hodgepodge situation. It's very similar to a lot of teams in the SEC, including Kentucky, where they had to go out in the transfer portal and they had to recoup a lot of lost talent by getting guys from all over the place, right? So Kentucky was obviously able to get their 4-man or 12-man rotation. Vanderbilt, on the other hand, they also got a 12-man rotation, but it kind of came from, instead of from JMU, it kind of came from all over the place. A couple of different pieces here that we actually talked about in the offseason about potentially coming to Kentucky, most notably Tyler Nickel out of Virginia Tech, who has been very solid for them. But I want to kind of get into some other players here in a minute. But first, let's talk a little bit more about Byington and Vanderbilt. As of today, 15-4, the Doors are, like I mentioned. They're firmly on the 10-seed line, according to Bracket Matrix, for now. Only 2 quad one wins so far for the Commodores. They're going to have plenty of opportunities. Obviously, this game against Kentucky is a big one. So on the 10-seed line for now, we'll see what happens. Will they be one of the first 4? And I think it's in Dayton. I may be wrong. That might have been last year. I think they'll probably end up being somewhere around that 10 to 11 spot if things continue to go well for them at home. Obviously, they've got matchups against Texas, Auburn. They've got a matchup against Ole Miss, Missouri, Arkansas. A lot of really tough conference games on the road as well. But as of today, this is a very good squad that is going to make the NCAA tournament. They're very similar to Alabama in terms of pace and aggression at the rim. They like to run up and down the floor, and the big thing that they do to create those transition opportunities and to create that tempo is they like to turn you over. This is a team that starts everything and ends everything with how they take care of the basketball and how they turn you over. According to KenPom, they are top 15 nationally in both turnover percentage on offense and defense. The Doors don't turn the ball over themselves as a very experienced team, but also they like to cause a little chaos on the defensive end of the floor. Ton of different notes here about Vanderbilt and their turnovers here. They're sixth in the nation in turnover margin. If you want to go look at that, they right now boast one of the best turnover margins in the nation, especially in the SEC. They've been able to do a lot of different things here in conference play early. At least they've been able to maintain competitiveness against some really good opponents by creating some turnovers. They did it against Alabama. Like I mentioned, they did it against Tennessee. They've been able to kind of turn any opponent over, not necessarily at will, but it's been a major factor. They lead the nation in points off of turnovers. They had 21 in that game against Tennessee, where they were able to, I think, build a lead in that first half, build a lead in the second half. Again, Tennessee fought back a second time, and then they were able to close it out there at the end, thanks to what they were doing, creating turnovers. Devin McLaughlin is somebody that you need to know whenever you're talking about the Commodores, and not necessarily in terms of creating those turnovers for the Commodores. They've got a ton of different guys that will do it for them, 9.9 steals per game, but he's somebody that's going to be a very frustrating piece to work against for other reasons, most notably what he's doing on the glass. Wyatt Huff of Wildcat Wave actually tweeted this out earlier today. Vandy's Devin McLaughlin has 4 double-doubles this season. He leads the SEC in offensive rebounding at 3.5 per game. So not only does this team play with tempo, not only does this team play very aggressive at the basket, but they're also another team that crashes the glass. This is yet another squad that Kentucky's going to face off against that really does like to throw everybody at the glass whenever a shot goes up. Not a big foul-drawing team, especially in SEC play, and they're not similar to Alabama in terms of the way that they shoot the three ball. They're more efficient than Alabama just slightly, but they don't rely on the outside shot hardly at all. In fact, what they like to do is they like to get to the line, and they like to get to the rim. Devin McLaughlin's going to be the X factor in this contest here for you. We talked about it with Cam Matthews. Grant Nelson was the big-bodied guy that Kentucky couldn't handle. This is the guy that you're going to be looking at here, McLaughlin, that's going to be on the glass, that's going to be driving into the lane, trying to get to the rim, pushing the issue, forcing the issue against the Cats. Can they physically wall up and stop him? If they can do that and they cannot turn the ball over, Kentucky's going to have a pretty good shot in this game. Let's continue to break this down. Some negatives about the Doors and kind of where Kentucky may match up well. Going to give you keys to the game, and then obviously we're going to talk about Caleb Wilson later on in the show. Before we get to all of that, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, the connection with other fans is simply unmatched. Obviously, I remember the thrill of seeing my favorite team clinch a playoff win live. I love getting to see teams like the Lions. I'm also a big Seahawks fan. Unfortunately, they didn't make the playoffs this year, but watching my favorite teams in the NFL playoffs are memories that I will never, ever forget. And this year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff to show you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. I've actually used Game Time Picks a lot recently to go to not just sporting events, but I've also used it for comedy. I've used it for multiple concerts here over the course of the winter and now heading into the spring. I've got a concert coming up that I'm going to go to. It could not have been easier for me to get tickets and get deals that I wanted. I found a super deal that gave me incredible value for amazing seats recently. I could even preview the view from my spot before buying. The all-in pricing is a game changer. There's no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, knowing my tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. And you can take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, that's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. Talking about the Commodores, they play with pace. They turn you over. They've got a new head coach. They've got a new roster. Devin McLaughlin is a really good player for them. If you want to look across other pieces on their roster that we need to take note of, Jason Edwards, their leading scorer, 17.3 points per game, shooting 38.8% from three, transfer from North Texas. He's a sophomore. He loves to get to the rim. He's a really, really nice finisher through contact. You've also got their second leading scorer, A.J. Hogard, I believe, or Hogard, depending on how you want to pronounce it. 11 points, 4.5 assists, 1.5 steals per game, shooting subpar numbers, less than 40% from the floor and less than 31% from three. But this guy is very, very experienced. He's been all over the place. I actually need to pull up his KenPom stuff once again. Yeah, he spent 4 years at Michigan State. I think he was at a school before decommitting and then choosing Vanderbilt, if I'm not mistaken. But this is his 5th year in college basketball. The Doors, very, very experienced. Like I mentioned, Tyler Nickel is in there in their top 5 scores at 10.5 per game, shooting 38.5% from three. This is a fun team that likes to score a lot of points and cause chaos. But what about the negatives? What are some things that the Doors struggle with? Well, for one, they lack height. They don't really have a ton of height on their roster. They don't play a ton of height. In fact, if you want to look at their 2 centers here in McLaughlin and Carey, Jalen Carey, both of them are 6'8" and 230 and 265 pounds respectively. So they got a little beef, but they don't have a ton of height. I think that could work in Kentucky's favor, especially if they're healthy here against the Doors on Saturday afternoon. Also need to note here that Vanderbilt, much like Kentucky, they've been horrible in SEC play on the defensive end of the floor. They are last in the conference in effective field goal percentage. They are 15th in free throw rate, I should say. So they allow a high shooting percentage, and they allow opponents to get to the line with ease here so far through 6 games in the SEC slate. They are last in the SEC in 3-point field goal percentage, 14th in 2-point field goal percentage. A lot of really bad things outside of the turnover column there that Vanderbilt's just not doing well. Teams are shooting on them. Teams are getting out and running on them. Actually, if you want to go and look in terms of tempo and average possession length, opponents actually play faster than Vanderbilt in terms of seconds per possession by just barely, which is not great considering that's what Vanderbilt wants to be known for, is playing with a lot of speed. Alabama, if you want to go look at that game, they torched them in transition. I think Alabama had 23 fast break points in that 103-87 win in Tuscaloosa. Obviously, Tennessee, they caused some problems as well. Tennessee also had 21 points off of turnovers, as did Vandy in that Tennessee loss. You saw the game against Mississippi State. You saw the game against Missouri, where teams were just kind of able to bang inside, get what they wanted, hit a pretty efficient number from three. Mississippi State, 51% inside the arc, 37% out. Missouri also shot very well, 56% inside, 41.7% out. This is the team that has just not been able to guard across the board, and they've struggled at different points to get back against teams that are really fast. I think this is an area where Kentucky can match up well and just get out and get to the rim. Lamont Butler, I think, could be big here in terms of his speed and ball handling ability. He's the only guard on this roster that I really do trust consistently with the ball in his hands as far as being able to fight off different opponents and being able to get to the rim and finish there pretty consistently. You want to see him get out and drive this ball, especially with the way that Kentucky can utilize their speed, both in the transition game and in the half court. I think he's going to be Kentucky's X factor here. Devin McLaughlin, again, going to be the X factor, I think, for the Doors. So those are the negatives. They've been really bad on defense. They don't have a ton of height. You've seen teams similarly built to Kentucky already kind of give them problems. I think Kentucky's got a couple of different guys that can match up as far as Butler and being really big here. Although I will note, and Brandon Ramsey of KSR tweeted this out, Kentucky ranks 352nd out of 364 teams in guarding the pick-and-roll ball handler per synergy. The Cats are 285th in guarding the P&R roll man. Meanwhile, Vanderbilt is 46th in scoring with the P&R ball handler and 24th with the roll man. That'll be the battle to watch for tomorrow. So obviously this is going to be Hogard and Devin McLaughlin, or Hogard and Carey. Both those guys I think are going to be big problems here for the for the Wildcats. But if you're able to kind of anchor things down with McLaughlin, if you're able to hold him from either getting the ball or shooting the ball, if you're able to prevent him from just getting it wholesale, I like where you're at with Hogard taking shots or trying to kick stuff out, because this Vanderbilt team, again, not phenomenal efficiency. They don't get a ton of shots up, but obviously the pace of this game could make that number go up, which could be a problem. But again, I'd rather have Hogard, who's shooting 39% from the floor. I'd rather have him against Butler in the PNR, taking and stuff on. I'd rather have him against Dawe, and I'd rather have guys like Carr crashing in on the boards, grabbing a rebound here with Amari kind of closing things out against McLaughlin. McLaughlin. So again, I think Kentucky's got different pieces that could match up well with Vanderbilt. They just have to be able to keep them from shooting a high percentage from outside the arc, and they have to keep the ball from getting inside, I think, first and foremost, which is going to be a lot of walling up on drives. It's going to be a lot of, again, trying to slow down the PNR and trying to create some havoc there, playing aggressive. Tennessee and Bama, those are the two most recent games here for the Commodores, and they're both very interesting in their own ways. Tennessee was the slowest game Vanderbilt has played this year, full stop. If you want to go look at pace on KenPom, it's the slowest game they played this season. They couldn't get out on the fast break, but again, they did get them all. Did get points off of turnovers. Geez. And then you look at the Bama game. Bama game was by far the fastest game Vanderbilt has played this season with a pace of 82, which is really, really fast. UNT transfer Jason Edwards was big in both contests. Somehow, A.J. Hogard, I put this down in my notes, he's still in college, but he was big also in both those games. They like to do a couple of different things that are actually very similar offensively to what Tennessee likes to do with Rick Barnes. So you'll see this across the board with college basketball as far as early initiation stuff with the offense, and as far as like different horns and stuff. They will have a big man set a screen off of the three-point line and have the guard make a decision whether he picks and pops, whether it's a pick and roll, whether it's a pick and then you kick it out to a corner and they drive the ball. Tennessee does a lot of stuff like this where they try to initiate actions early by having those two, both the guard and the center, kind of walk things down. Once you get past half court, then as the guard comes with the center will stop, set the wall, and then you get to run things off of it, which is really interesting that both Tennessee and Vandy did that so well, and Tennessee could not stop it consistently. Just some tough shot making by Vanderbilt in that contest. But you hope to not see things like that here. You hope to see Kentucky be able to close out on outside shots. You're hopefully able to also guard the PNR. You're able to prevent things from getting inside easily. You've got to be able to just play sound defense, and it's all going to come at a pretty high tempo. It's a tough matchup for the Cats. Very interesting team in Vanderbilt. Kentucky has the guys to go on the road and win this game, especially if they're healthy. I think that Kentucky defensively is going to be able to do things with Butler that I think should work out in their favor. This Vanderbilt team does not distribute the ball particularly well in terms of assists and assist rate. Maybe you can try and shut some things down in the isolation game. Jason Edwards is going to be a big problem for you there. We'll see how it works. I think Kentucky should win this game in theory if they can shoot an average percentage from three and not get out-rebounded so significantly. Again, McLaughlin's going to be big. Jason Edwards is going to be really, really big for you in this game. I think Kentucky wins. I don't know how much they're going to win by. I just think that it's going to be a margin that you're kind of tight with, as it has been all SEC slate long. So let me know what you think. Does Kentucky win this game? How much? Final score predictions in the comments below. All right, let's talk a little bit about Caleb Wilson committing to North Carolina. What do I think about it? And are there other options for Kentucky out there? I believe there absolutely are. Before I do that, though, I just want to remind you guys, if you've not subscribed to the show already, whether you're watching on YouTube, podcast feed, I would love it if you did so. Thank you guys so much for watching this. We are already over halfway through this season, just 13 regular season games to go for Kentucky. It's insane. It's kind of flown by. I hate to see this recruitment with Caleb Wilson go the way it went, but of course, I think that Mark Pope and company are in good hands. So again, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. Really, really appreciate you. Okay, Caleb Wilson committed to North Carolina last night at about 2 in the morning, almost 2 in the morning on Inside the NBA TNT. The recruitment itself, I felt kind of bad because they went through the entire NBA slate, like the Inside the NBA crew went through the entirety of the NBA slate. And then they got to a commercial break, and before they got to that commercial break, they were like, "Oh, we've got a special announcement from," and like it's something to the effect of like a great talent. They did not mention this kid's name. They did not mention that he was committing somewhere. They just said, "Oh, look, a great talent will be making an announcement on our show. We've never done this before. We'll be back." After like an hour of talking about NBA ball, it was not great. I feel bad for him a little bit, but also at the same time, the way that this was kind of drug out awkwardly, you can speculate on what happened here. You can speculate on the money. You can speculate on what Kentucky wants to do, what UNC wants to do. I think all of it is worthless. There's no point in looking back and rehashing everything that we thought happened in this recruitment because, frankly, I'm here to tell you nobody, not a single person, knew what was happening with this recruitment. And the proof of that is in a tweet by Travis Branham last night, where he was told by sources that Caleb Wilson had apparently committed to North Carolina way back early in December, silently committed and signed. And it was just a matter of announcing, just continuing to drag Kentucky along in this. Nobody on the local beat, nobody on Twitter, nobody knew what was happening in this recruitment until very, very, very late. So obviously we can make comments about the money and like speculate again, but there's no point in doing it. The highest bidder is either going to get the kid or it's going to have an extremely strong influence over the recruitment. That's how it is. If you don't like it, too bad. If I don't like it, too bad. I don't like it. Too bad for me. That's just kind of how things go with college recruitments nowadays. Caleb Wilson, I really do think he's a good player. I think he's extremely talented. I think he's going to be a great defensive prospect for the Tar Heels. We'll see how his offensive game kind of progresses here with Hubert Davis, who is struggling right now with UNC. But, man, it was a big pickup for them. They needed it. We needed it, frankly. But now you just kind of have to look past it and say, okay, you've got all this money here that you are potentially going to spend on this prospect that you can now allocate your resources elsewhere. So where can you look? Where are the other options for the Cats? Well, obviously, Nate Ament, the 5-star forward, is going to be a big-time name that we're going to be having conversations about. More of a finesse outside shooter with some high upside. This is a player that I could genuinely see sticking around for more than 1 year with Kentucky if he did choose to commit there. Obviously, a top 11 that he released recently. It's going to be a while before we get an announcement from this kid as to where he's going. He's not visited Kentucky either yet, so we'll keep tabs on that. I'm actually really excited about Gilbert Arenas' son, Elijah Arenas. According to Travis Branham, USC, Kentucky, and Gilbert's alma mater, Arizona, are the three teams really in the race right now that have been mentioned a ton. So Kentucky going up against two West schools. We'll see what happens there. If you don't get a Nate Ament, if you don't get a guy like Elijah Arenas out of the recruiting cycle, which, by the way, it's drying up. There's not a ton of answers left here for Mark Pope in the recruiting cycle. You go and get some athleticism in the portal. That's where I think Kentucky can look. Either athleticism, somebody bouncy, somebody that can get up, dunk the ball, that can run around in transition, that just shows a lot of speed, finesse, and muscle. Or you go and get somebody that's a really good defensive prospect in the transfer portal. Frankly, Kentucky doesn't have enough of that at the forward position. They don't have enough muscle and defense. Come on, I think that's a pretty obvious one here for the Cats. So where could you look in the portal? Well, there are a couple of prospects that I just want to keep an eye on. Again, will these guys even enter? No idea, but I think it's worth noting. First player here actually is a player that Kentucky was going after pretty heavily, and that's Jaden Quaintance. Jaden Quaintance of Arizona State is a really, really, really good defender. One of the best in the nation at both defending the ball and rebounding. He leads Arizona State in defensive box plus minus at like plus 5.4. He's actually been starting at the 4 for the Sun Devils so far this season. He's got a pretty decent offensive rating for a kid that's known for his D. He's shooting 60% from inside the arc, 3 of 22 from outside, so at least he's trying to take those shots, but doesn't really seem like his strength. What is his strength is blocking shots. He's 14th nationally in block percentage. He is one of the best rebounders in the nation, at least in terms of percentages. I believe he's averaging like 8.8 there on the glass. Really good on both ends of the floor. 6'9". Again, got a lot of beef to him. Strong player down low. He'll only get better as he progresses here in college. He's somebody that I would like to keep an eye on if he enters the portal. I think Kentucky could do a lot with him. And then the other player that I want to talk about that I think would just be perfect is Oscar Clough. And you may say, who on earth is Oscar Clough? Well, Clough actually started his career at Washington State. He started it in the JUCO ranks, and then he went to Washington State in 2024, and he is a 6'11", 260-pound center. Last year at Washington State, he wasn't like anything crazy to write home about, and then he transferred to South Dakota State, and some of the numbers here may shock you. I'm actually going to pull up just his raw stats here real quick before I get into the KenPom numbers, because those are extremely impressive on his own. At South Dakota State, he is averaging 17.7 points per game, 12.3 rebounds. He's shooting 67.7%. His effective field goal percentage is 68.2. He is also averaging 2.7 assists and nearly a block per game. He leads the South Dakota State team in, I believe, defensive box plus minus, and I think defensive win shares, if I'm not mistaken. He also leads in defensive rating. So he's a good defender and one of the nation's best rebounders. And I didn't really realize how good this kid was at rebounding the ball until I went and looked. He actually leads the nation in player efficiency rating and total rebound percentage. The man is a menace on the boards. You want to go look at his KenPom stats with me? 6th nationally in offensive rebound percentage, 3rd in defensive rebound percentage. Boys, that is extremely hard to do, to be that good on both sides of the ball while boasting an offensive rating of 132.2, that's top 50 nationally, while also boasting an assist rate of 22.1%. That's top 325 nationally. You're also top 300 in block percentage. You're also top 200 in free throw rate. You shoot 79.5% from the charity stripe. I mean, there is literally not a single defect in this kid's game. At 6'11", 260. He's everything Mark Pope could want. He's a rebounder. He's a defender. He's an efficient shooter. He gets to the line. He's a distributor at 22.1%, which, by the way, is just a touch higher than Brandon Garrison, who's playing really well right now, passing the rock. This is perfect. This kid would be absolutely perfect for Mark Pope if he's able to get a 5th year, and I believe that he will get a 5th year. He's from Australia originally. So Oscar Clough is a guy that I will be watching very closely with South Dakota State. And if you say, well, Lance, you aren't going to be able to really get a ton of talent here from the mid-majors, I would push back on that and say All-American center Janai Broome, he was from, if I'm not mistaken, he was from, it was from the conference that EKU plays in. He was from Morehead State, is where Janai Broome was from. Mark Sears is from Ohio, not Ohio State, like the Ohio Bobcats. If you want to go look at Chaz Lanier, he was from North Florida. He's playing very well for Tennessee right now. If you want to go look at a guy like Dalton Connect, he was from Northern Colorado last season. So there's a lot of talent to be had at the mid-major level, and Clough could be perfect, at least in my opinion. So let me know what you think in the comments below about Kentucky and UNC. Obviously, the Cats losing Caleb Wilson sucks, but it is what it is. Also, Kentucky playing against Vanderbilt tomorrow at 2:30. Let me know what your final score predictions for that game. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That's at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. You can hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and God bless.